areas where there are VCT that is kind of yellowed, and we would recommend to replace VCT. VCT requires waxing. So we might recommend that that gets replaced with some sort of tile that doesn't require that much maintenance now that there's an opportunity to do so. Okay, and then in the athletics, there's a red score. There's one gymnasium in the high school. There is upper courts there, but often that time it becomes a problem for scheduling, so that's part of the reason that it's getting the score that it is.
Excuse me. Mm-hmm. Did you say that there's a binder with this information in it?
Yes.
Are we able to look at that while you go through it? Because we can't read it.
We can't see
so
it.
I don't really know what it says.
Far away.
Thank you.
We do have
I'm blind. I'm not.
we don't always send them out ahead of time because we find that people they're just reading along and
Not paying attention.
Not paying attention or listening. So
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Let's see. It's hard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can't read anything.
You say you can't read, or you can't read that.
You're going to make that bigger, Tara.
Oh,
If you could just zoom in on that a little bit.
Tara, if you could use your teacher voice too, then I should.
Okay.
I'll go sit in the corner.
What page are you on? 20?
Page 20.
Page 105 it is.
It's lovely colors.
Okay. Yeah, we are on page 20. There's no questions on page 20. We're going to move along to 21. So this is a long one. You've got mechanical and plumbing. And then moving on to 22, we've got electrical items. And then on page 23, we start getting into narratives. So there will be an architectural narrative. This kind of just goes into sort of broad ideas about the site, about the architecture of the building, and potential issues or possibilities there. There's also a mechanical narrative on page 24. Continues to page 25. And on page 26, there's some electrical narratives. And then on page 30, there are photographs. So here, as we like to say, we kind of show the worst of the worst photographs, especially as they might be related to any solutions that we'll eventually propose in the last part of the document. So here you can see a classroom with some of those doorknobs. It's not an ADA lever, right? In the second photo, you can see VCT, so that's a vinyl composite tile in a science classroom that's just beginning to sort of separate from each other. And then some rust and corrosion in a restroom ceiling grid. And then the next page, kitchen quarry tiles where you've got the drains kind of elevated above the floor. Some damage to a drywall in the clinic right next to a bed that's in the clinic. Some peeling wallpaper in the administration area. And then some water stains that are happening at the windows at the back of the high school building. I will have to say, other school districts that we do, I kind of struggle to narrow it down to a certain number of photographs, but with your district, I kind of struggled to come up with enough photographs of the worst of the worst. Your buildings are very well maintained, and so that was a little bit of a challenge, but again, this is trying to show you the worst of the worst as it is related to some of the proposed solutions later. So then we get into the middle school. So again here, something I want to point out is enrollment is at 419 currently, and the capacity that we calculated is at 713. Middle schools are a little bit different than high schools, so this one has a 75% utilization rate. So that just means at any given time that 75% of your classrooms are occupied with students. And then on page 33, you've got the room number maps. And then moving into the scoring. Might stop and point out some reds if there are any, but not a whole lot of reds in the middle school. Getting down into, on page 37, in environment and teaching tools, number 4, writing boards and teaching tools. Just some notes there that the pole vault projectors are at the end of their useful life. Some classrooms are using duct tape to hold computer connectors to the wall. So it's just, you know, things don't last forever, and the pole vault systems are at the end of their useful life. And then furniture, fixtures, equipment, and number 7, we were told that the cafeteria tables were originally for elementary students, and sometimes they can be really uncomfortable for middle school students, being resourceful and making use of the furniture that you have, but just something to consider there, and why that section is getting a red grade. Then a note here, program curriculum, page 38, and the science project labs, there's limited electrical outlets. It's pretty typical that we see in a lot of buildings, especially for the electrical needs today. Mechanical, plumbing, electrical systems.
Just real quick, a question on the electrical. As you're adding on to each classroom, have they done a study of what it would take to, or whether the current main electrical will handle that, or whether we need to upgrade the main?
As far as doing building additions?
Yes.
No, I
Not
don't
building additions, but as adding outlets, et cetera.
Oh,
et
adding
cetera.
receptacles. I'm not sure if that level of detail was gone into. It was really more just evaluating what you have and what your current needs are. So, you know, if you were wanting to add electrical receptacles, that would need to be evaluated by an engineer.
But your electrical service and your distribution equipment, it's all in green. It means it's in excellent shape. So, you know, if you had to add some circuits, that might just be adding a small bit.
Well, yeah, it's you can't, upgrading the main is the expensive part, but if there's ample room, yeah.
It looks like it's all in green, so it sounds like you guys have, in fact, all your mechanical systems, mechanical and electrical, looks like they're in really good shape. Your schools are been well taken care of for mechanical, electrical services, much better than a lot of the city.
Yeah, we usually see a lot of reds in these areas, so it's nice to not see any reds in some of these schools.
Yes. Good job.
All right, so page 41, it starts the narratives. And then once you get to page 48, there's some photographs. Again, kind of struggle to find some of the worst of the worst. There is a little bit of masonry staining on the outside of the media center, where I believe that there is a gutter leak. There's also some damaged metal fascia on the exterior of the middle school. And going inside, really just looking at some flooring and then furniture. All right, and then page 50, we're starting Brookville Elementary. So at Brookville, you can see enrollment as 474 students, and then a capacity that we calculated there as 743. Elementary schools typically have a different utilization rate. So this one's put at 90% utilization rate. And then those classrooms do not count the art classrooms, the music classrooms. So just typical classrooms in elementary school for the capacity.
One quick step back. What was wrong with the middle school cafeteria flooring?
It's a VCT flooring. This picture doesn't really show it well, but it has some scuffs and some things like that. It's just kind of aging. Again, it being VCT, would recommend considering that replacement for something that doesn't require as much maintenance. That being said, it's not terribly ugly or ineffective as a flooring. Again, I struggle to fill up these photographs, especially at the middle school. Okay, so in Brookville. So Brookville, we got a red in outdoor athletic fields, playground. A lot of that just has to do with those playground sets being very aged. They've been well maintained, but there's only so much they can do before they start to decay. Also some red at exterior masonry. There's some water staining that's happening there. There's some grout and some sealant and control joints that have washed out just due to the age and due to the weather. Move on. 55. So again, some notes about some different flooring items that we put in the red category. Also some ceilings there having some stains on it, or some corrosion perhaps in the actual metal grid of the ceiling. Should be considered for replacement. All right, getting through electrical systems. Got the narratives. I'm going to continue on through the narratives. So, and page 65, there are photographs. So you can see there some of the water staining that's happening on the masonry, especially where those canopies are and where the gutter sort of meets the masonry on the wall. There's a plastic slide that I can tell has been around for a while. It's really trying to hold on, but it's not going to last much longer. And also some photographs of VCT that's sort of separating in the cafeteria. And then here we've got some photographs mostly looking at flooring. There's also some lockers in a classroom. Don't typically see metal lockers. Might recommend those change to cubbies if that were something that would be important for you all. And also there's some doorknobs. That being said, most of the main entryways in the school have been changed out, and they have a door lever instead of a doorknob, but there are still some doorknobs in the school. Okay, so we're on page 67. This is Laurel Elementary. So again, want to point out enrollment versus the capacity. So enrollment being 250 students, and the capacity of the school being calculated as 833. So less than 50% enrollment versus the capacity of the school.
How do you get 90% utilization?
That's just typical for schools in the U.S. For elementary, it's usually 90 to 100%. I want to say middle schools are 70 to 80, and then high schools can be 80 to 90. So I just kind of picked a point in the middle to come up with this calculation. If you all happen to know your utilization rate, we can apply that to it. That would be great, but if not, I'm just...
So by utilization, what she's saying is how many classrooms are typically sitting empty during the day. So like a lot of times in a high school, when the teachers are on a break or another period, that classroom sits empty. So they have a less utilization rate. Elementary schools, the teachers are usually in those classrooms every period of the day. So there's less classrooms sitting empty. So that's what she's calling a utilization rate.
Right.
It's just how many are typically would be filled with a teacher and students during the day. Because obviously during the day, all the classrooms aren't full if you walk through a school. And typically more of them are full at an elementary school and less are full at a middle school or high school. There's usually classrooms that are sitting empty where the teachers are on a break or a period, or that classroom is a special classroom and it's just not getting used, 5 periods a day, it's getting used 3 or something. So that's what she means by utilization rate.
And so, that's trying to calculate the capacity, and we want to be realistic. Yeah, you could say it's 100% utilization, but that would be very, cramped as far as the capacity. And we do want to be considerate of the different school types and what their typical utilization rates are.
One of the big ones, though, Tara reviewed this draft with me. She worked on it by herself, and then we sat down and reviewed it. One of the things that jumped out at me as we went through it was just the enrollment at a couple of your elementary schools, like Laurel being debate where the capacity is, if you could really fit 833 in it, but if you went down to that, say you only calculated 700, there's a lot less kids in those.
Yeah, originally that was designed to also house 7th and 8th grade students.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's such a large number of unutilized classrooms.
Right, so that's kind of the biggest thing that really jumped out at me as we reviewed this study is that, you have two elementary schools really that have a capacity of say 700-800 students when you only have 250 kids in there. So, but we'll let her finish and get to the end.
68's got the room number map on there. And as you were mentioning, it was designed to house middle school students as well, right? So you can kind of see some classrooms that are in there that are related to more, middle school, like laboratory classrooms like home economics and different laboratories. Okay, so as I mentioned before, Laurel has a lot of items on the site. A lot of it is worn, kind of getting towards the end of its useful life. For instance, you go to number 8 in landscaping and plazas, there's a metal bench that says Yellow Jackets on it. It's quite rusted, quite weathered. Kind of the reason that category is getting that score, just to draw your attention to that. And some other things like the playground also aging, the railroad ties on the edges of the playground, some notes as far as those details. Then getting into building envelopes, we've got control joint sealants that are failing. You'll see the same thing happening at Mount Carmel, right? It's a sister school. You're going to see a lot of similar grades or similar scores there, with the big difference between Laurel and Mount Carmel being some of these items that are on the site just because there are more items on the site. Again here, doorknobs not being ADA levers. Jumping through this, so we're at mechanical, electrical. Move quickly through the narratives. You can see some photographs here. Again, doorknobs. You can see here where we're talking about that control joint that's here. Usually it has sealant in it. You can also see some staining in the grout on the masonry. Because it's tough pointed. Some other details. You see toilet partitions have gotten a lot of graffiti on them. Should be considered for replacement. There's a wall in between the kindergarten classrooms that's an accordion movable wall, which never gets moved, and unfortunately they can hear through it, so might be considered for replacement. And moving into Mount Carmel. Again, want to point out enrollment here being at 223, and the capacity being at 720, so this one is a little bit smaller than Laurel. It also has the addition that was built on in 2008. Those classrooms are a little bit bigger than the other classroom sizes, so even though it's very similar in shape to the other school, it does have a lower capacity available to it. So looking through the scores, again, it's going to be very similar to Laurel. Perhaps one of the differences that I did notice in the interior, the nurse's clinic lacks storage for particular items that a nurse clinic might need relative to Laurel. Just an interesting difference there, but besides that, a lot of similarities. And we're down into mechanical plumbing, electrical. So you can see here there's a red grade on exterior lighting, just for a lack of emergency egress lighting observed at the exit. The narratives, we'll move through those quickly. So there is one item it is at Mount Carmel. Is it at Laurel? Did I put this in the wrong place? The wastewater treatment?
Is it Mount?
It is at Mount Carmel, okay. So that is something that we missed in our evaluation, and we still need to get evaluated. So you can see that is highlighted here. So that kind of goes back into the fact that this is a draft. So once we can get that appropriately evaluated and get that in here, we'll be more ready to publish this. Looking at photographs here, we have the lovely conversation pits from the 1970s that are in the kindergarten classrooms. Unfortunately, underutilized as nifty as they are.
When I was in kindergarten, there's nothing wrong with that.
And then some other things. The terrazzo in the hallway, unfortunately, the base is sort of splitting from the terrazzo in the hallway, creating a crack there in the floor. Not a dangerous crack or anything, just aesthetically not appealing. And you can kind of see here, we've got the, kind of what I was talking about before, you've got a shop that was intended more for middle school age students. That's now being used for storage. And then a home economics class, or what was previously a home economics class, being used as a teacher's lounge. I think it's a pretty clever use of that space. And then you get into the central office and the gymnasium. Not talking about capacity or enrollment here. I don't know if we even have any red items in the central office. All right, we do have some red items in the mechanical plumbing. This is page 107. So there's a flue for a boiler that was not in compliance. We've got some suggestions for that later in the next portion. And then some notes about sanitary piping failing, need of replacement. That's definitely in the original building portion, not in the office portion. 109, architectural narratives, other narratives. And then just one page of photographs. The central office. All right, and now we're going to dive into proposed solutions. I don't know how I am on time. So each of the proposed solutions will start off with this color graphic. So again, we're revisiting that room number map floor plan, and here it'll have different things that are sort of highlighted, and then you have a key to sort of relate yourself to the construction types of what we're recommending. This isn't showing all of it, but it can kind of help you understand what areas we are suggesting that should be touched. So you've got renovation colors for different areas. And then you also have a hatch looking at some ceiling replacements. And then you go on to page 116. So here will be the high school estimated cost. You can see the square footage. And across here, there's a cost range. So to every one of these items, we were putting a low and a high cost range, just to give you a general idea of what range these items could be within. So you can see the total up here at the top, the big red numbers. That is quite a range in between those two numbers there. And this list that we're giving you, so you can see there's different items that are highlighted different colors. So the red are things that we would recommend to be considered immediately. The orange are things that are short-term, whatever short-term might mean, next couple of years. Mid-term, it could happen maybe 5+ years. And then items that aren't colored are just recommendations that we're giving, but we're not particularly applying any sort of timeline, recommended timeline to them. And so this list, it'll go down into different sort of categories. So this is showing you doing the absolute most of all of our recommendations over a long period of time, right? So you're getting a very large cost range associated to that. But this is kind of a shopping list, if you will. You can kind of go through it and decide what makes sense to you. And then you'll see on the very last page, eventually we'll get to a separation of those immediate short-term, mid-term items and a total cost amount related to those to help you with planning.
Don't fall out of your chair. I'm not recommending you do all that work on there, okay? It's just a grand total of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're planning, looking out the next 10, 20 years or whatever. So don't fall out of your chairs. You know, you might look more closely at the reds and the smaller numbers.
Mm-hmm.
There,
Is there,
in your time planning.
I'm sorry. Is there a breakout of the cost of just the reds as opposed to just the yellows?
Yes, so the very last page, we'll get to that. So you'll be able to see the total numbers in relation to the sort of different phases. And again, so this total number that you see related to the school is doing the absolute most of all the things that we're recommending. Okay, then you go into the middle school, same thing, you get a graphic that has some color coordinating on there related to the different construction types. And then again, you'll go into a list of various items. So you can see a building envelope, repair and protect cracked and eroded limestone front entry. Might be something immediately to consider, especially as it continues to be eroding. Something to address quickly. And then in the orange, repair gutters and fascia around the media center. Those aren't particularly immediate things, but something that should be considered fairly soon. And then you don't have a color for consider future roof replacement. So that's something we just wanted to get on there and put a price to, so that it could be something that you're considering for the future. It's not even something that we're putting into a category of immediate, short-term, midterm. All right, getting into the elementaries, page 121. There are 3 different options in relation to the elementaries. So option 1 is a closure of Mount Carmel and renovations of Laurel. Option 2 is a closure of Laurel and renovations of Mount Carmel. And option 3, a closure of both Mount Carmel and Laurel, renovations and additions to Brookville to facilitate all of those students. So this first one is Brookville Elementary, just looking at renovations to it. Again, you have the color coordinated map here. You start getting into a list of items. So up here, you get a total, and that is to do renovations to Brookville as what we're recommending. Again, that's doing the most. And so this being option 1, again, option 1 is a closure of Mount Carmel, renovations of Laurel. It should be listed on there as well, renovations of Brookville. So you'd have renovations of Laurel, renovations of Brookville, and a closure of Mount Carmel. So something that we're looking at here on page 123 would be operational cost savings. So this is not factored into the total, but this is just something to consider. Some general numbers that we would put at operational cost savings on an annual basis between the utilities, the maintenance, and the staffing costs in relation to closing a school. So if we move on to page 124, so this is looking at Brookville within option 3. So option 3 would be closure of both Mount Carmel and Laurel. And then renovations and additions to Brookville, you would need to have additions to be able to accommodate all of the students in the district at this particular facility. So this is just looking at a general idea of what could happen there. You've certainly got some space to do some additions. We would recommend a new academic wing, and then a new entry, and then some renovations to some interior items. Probably take out the stage so that you could enlarge the cafeteria to be able to facilitate that. So this is looking at Brookville within option 3. So you've got a total here number for all of the renovations that are being recommended to Brookville as its existing facility, plus some other items to deal with those additions. And then again here showing operational cost savings. So this would be related to closing 2 schools and consolidating everything to Brookville. So this number is doubled.
Maybe we should stop here. 'Cause this is a big deal. We get it. But this is really, a big deal for you guys, for you and for your community, and we don't take it lightly. We certainly don't like walking in the community and suggesting that somebody close an elementary school, much less 2. We understand that, schools are the anchor for the community. Everybody really desires their kids to go to a neighborhood elementary school. So we certainly get the gravity of what is in this part of the study. I think what the basically, you know, you're looking at $500,000 to $800,000 a year in operational savings if you were to close one of your elementary schools. Those savings, let's say, you know, we'll just take the low end, 500,000. They go on forever. That's every year for the next 50 years. As you look at, you know, the possibility that you could actually do an addition to your central elementary school and bring all of your kids into one campus. And I get that it's not popular. You're a county-wide school. Kids are going to be riding on buses. I get all that. But you're looking at a possible savings of $1 million to $1.5 million a year in operational savings. Again, that goes on forever. That means, you know, the next 40 years, the school district would possibly save $50 million in operational savings. That's money that can be used for, you know, teacher salaries, education. So, to me, this is a huge decision for a school board and a community to look at. We know that, I mean, you guys' facilities are in great condition. You've been taking, you know, great care of them, but we understand that you're dealing with what the legislature does to you with school funding from the state of Indiana. Yep. And that's what you get, okay? So we certainly understand that predicament. You're in a more of a rural area with you don't have growing enrollment in this county. So that's hitting you hard, and it just causes some really tough decisions that need to be made for the future.
Well, the decisions that the legislature makes is for big city schools, and then we bear the brunt of it, and that's what's killing us.
I absolutely don't disagree with you. We work with school districts all across the state of Indiana. We work in some they have such growth in their tax bases because they've got Amazon warehouses and everybody else moving into their school districts. They've got huge subdivisions with kids coming in and enrollment skyrocketing, and they're in a totally different situation than what you guys are in. But you're not alone in Indiana. We're working with several school districts across the state. We do the same analysis. They're feeling the squeeze. They have declining enrollment. They're operating too many school buildings, and they have to make tough decisions about potentially closing buildings and consolidating their students into less buildings. And they're being forced to do it. You know, some of them, if they don't do that, they'll end up getting taken over by the state.
Well, you can't it's state law. You can't operate in red, so you have to.
We understand, and we don't present this study lightly. Like I said, we came out here to do we were just hired to do a study of your facilities. We came out here and did our usual study of facilities and looked at the condition of your buildings. Mm-hmm. And then I sat down with Tara and said, I want to see the draft. And when I saw the enrollment numbers compared to capacity of your elementaries, I said, stop here. This is not what I was expecting. I called Tammy, and she probably remembers the day I called her and said, hey, this is what I'm seeing, you know, and I just want you to be aware. And she said, well, you need to finish the study and present the information as you see it. So that's what we've done, and we understand the gravity of the situation, but we want to provide you. We're just outsiders from this community. I don't live here. My kids don't go to school here, but we just want to present the information so that you have it, so that you can make the decisions that's right will say sometimes in other communities, if you have a community engagement meeting, sometimes we present the same information that we presented to you here tonight to community groups so that they can understand. And we haven't seen your finances. I have no idea what your finances are like, okay? And we're not planning to look at that, but sometimes we just present the information to communities so that they can see what you're up against. And what you're up against is you've got 3 elementary schools that are underutilized, and there's a lot of potential operational savings by consolidating down to 2, or there's the option of saving, $1.5 million a year for the next 50 years by consolidating into basically one central campus. And I know kids are going to be on a bus for a long time, traveling the county. And I get it. We work with other county-wide schools, and we understand the challenges of transportation. But I really just wanted to stop here because to me this slide it's the big deal for the school corporation. I thought if you have questions for us or discussion, that
This is exactly what we need to look at, and look at further down the road of what decisions that we have to make. We really appreciate you doing this here for us.
Why wasn't there an option for closing Brookville Elementary and renovating Mount Carmel and Laurel?
Really just has to do with its location, being in the center of the district, and it being one of the larger schools between the 3. It could handle consolidation down to that one. That being said, if you'd like to look at an option 4, that would look at that.
Well, the logistics indicate that if Brookville was closed, Laurel and Mount Carmel would increase their enrollment each for that.
That could be a possibility. There is the
and it
capacity
would
for that.
Be a
there's
solution as
capacity.
far as busing time and such, but then there's also the notion that we have one central main campus too. So there's a lot to consider with everything, but she is correct. We probably need option 4
Option
so
4.
we can weigh it out.
Okay.
And we can do that, and she's right. There's no certain reason except for kind of, and I don't know how you operate your buses, but a lot of times it could be if it's a single bus route, it's picking up K-12, they're picking up and all coming to a central location. And that's probably the only reason that we looked at that and not closing the central elementary and pushing those kids out to the end. We can certainly add option 4 to it. So that's a good point.
Right. Something we did not consider, but
Yeah.
would be good to weigh against the other ones.
Yeah.
Do you have the data to include transportation cost changes in this?
We do not.
That would be very complex because you'd have to figure out what routes you're going to run to pick up which kids and who's going where, and that would be very complex at that point. This is a general theory of a ballpark what we're doing.
Right. And like these operational cost savings aren't exact to your schools.
Yeah, they're not exact. Those are numbers that we've kind of generated looking at, staffing savings. That's usually, one less principal, less office staff, less kitchen staff, and we come up with those ranges. Maintenance, just the maintenance of the building, and then utilities. We pull from similar size schools what we see their utility bills.
I think it's more of a shock factor for us that we came in here for the facilities review and we're seeing that closing an elementary school is maybe have to be one of our options, and seeing how it's presented as an option is just shock factor for us.
And that's why I wanted to stop here, because I understand that it is a shock factor. We really wanted to stop and absorb the shock. I certainly do. We're just presenting options to you, giving you information, and
And I know what you're thinking, Grant, is they should have been here last week before they did the alcohol thing, you know. So, that's understood there.
Terry, do you want to move on to, I think, 135, to that summary that Francis was talking about?
All right, so 135, again, similar to the way that the scoring is laid out. We've got high school, middle school, but now we've got sort of the different options in here. So option 1 being renovations to Brookville and Laurel. Option 2 being renovations to Brookville and Mount Carmel. Option 3 being Brookville getting additions and renovations. And so kind of highlighted here the lows and highs in relation to each other. And also we understand this is not exactly how budgets work. We did just want to apply sort of what those operational cost savings would be if you were to look about 5 years out. So you can help kind of understand how those could relate to those different options.
Yeah, I don't know, we should carry them out 20 years, because a typical bond, if you're selling a bond to make additions or renovations to accomplish one of your bond period, a lot of times you do a 20-year bond payback. So I guess thinking about, operational savings over 20 years against bond payment to make.
How soon would you have the option 4?
Can you give us a couple weeks? 2 weeks? Spring break?
You have till 9 o'clock tonight.
No, I just,
Yeah,
Just
you could give us,
wondering.
you could give us a couple of weeks, we can come back, we can get an option 4, and you email it back to Jim, get that pulled together, get those numbers to you.
It'll help us gather up some
You're
MEP
around
items.
2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know it's spring break time, so I know it's have to ask. People leave that, so.
Okay, so then you go on to page 136. Just wanted to give this information to you in relation to the different options, kind of total up the enrollment that you have at your schools versus those capacities again. Just kind of wanted to put it all in one chart so you could really compare those numbers to each other now that you've seen the different options that we're proposing.
And we will say, these capacities, I mean, that's.
It's not exact.
You're never gonna get, I mean, that's your schools are packed.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't expect you to put 833 kids in more, okay, ever. That's just like maximum capacity. You got
that'd be nice.
yeah, but that's every nook and cranny has a kid in it. You're probably not gonna get there, so, somebody challenges us, there's no way we can put 800 kids at school. I get it, you probably won't. But
Right.
that is kind of just maximum capacity, so. And I think you just have to use those numbers to understand that currently, Mount Carmel and Laurel, and Brookville are grossly under capacity.
I think what stood out to me is when you look at 9, 10, and 11, and 12, you're looking at pretty high class numbers. And then you push down. There's a significant difference there in the number of students that are enrolling as kindergartners and working their way through. So we're going to see that in middle school and the high school at capacity.
But we do have a little bit of a discrepancy on our elementaries because they don't include St. Michael kids. And the high school does include St. Michael kids.
What is the percentage of kids we get from St. Michael's? I mean, we don't get them all.
No.
We go to Oldenburg.
Yeah.
We may get 20, 25. It's not a significant amount.
On option 12, this is for everybody. Before they do option 4, where did the 6th graders end up? Are they gonna end up back at the county schools or at the middle school before they do the modeling? Because I noticed that on these options, they got them all at the middle school.
I don't. Is that a question for me?
And yeah, that would.
No, I guess, yeah, I mean,
Which way do we want them to run the model? Do we want to see
Oh.
where we go
Can't take them back.
Oh, I don't know.
out or
I
back to
can't
middle
take
school?
it one at a time.
Your middle school is way under capacity right now.
Check on that number. Not exactly sure. Yeah, it definitely does have some room.
I mean, if you're running, yeah. Oh, I got it, so we got one together.
And Laurel and Mount Carmel are sort of situated where they have some spaces that they could accommodate middle school, but it would probably be our general recommendation to get all the middle school kids in one place. But that could really be up to what you all would like to do.
You can see, these are awkward numbers here, so at Laurel, and I don't know if they're exact, but I'm just use an example. You have 31 kids, say, in 6th grade. Is that one classroom or two, right? One full classroom or two half empty. And then you have 22 kids at another one, so that one's not very full. So my point being, sometimes if you have a grade level in a building, it's easier to get the classroom sizes more equal, which could cause you to have one less teacher for a grade. So you have the potential, say, of a $65,000 a year savings if you have a grade level in one building, because then you could, it's easier to get every classroom with 25 kids in each classroom, where you could end up with some awkward things like 35 kids in one grade. And then what are you doing at a school? You break them into two classrooms probably, and you got two teachers.
And we've already had that situation.
We have that every
Yeah.
year.
And that's not common. That's the other reason that we're seeing consolidation of schools to get grade levels into one school. I mean, we have some of the rural areas. We're working with one that I really think they're heading towards a K, like 3 building, 4 or 5. Instead of they're operating 3 elementary schools right now. But when you do that, it's hard to get that grade level alignment and spread those kids. If they're all in one school, and if they're all like that through your district, I mean, you could save, it could be a couple teacher salaries a year.
The per pupil spending is extremely different across the board as well.
There's not
And that's-
equity.
Yeah, that's another thing is equitable spending per student. I know we have that in my own local school district. We have an elementary school in my school district. My kids graduate from Franklin Community Schools, but we have a rural school that has 210 kids in it, and the rest of our elementaries are 400 to 600. I saw the data. We're spending about $11,000 per student out at a small school, 6,500 per student at our other ones now. Most of the taxpayers and community members have never seen those numbers, but if they did, they probably would think it's unequitable.
You're wasting money.
Well,
Oh, no, they just, the
private
parity of the education.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then page 137, the final page, is dividing those things up by the different phases. So looking at that immediate short-term to midterm into the none category. So here, again, across the top, we've got high school, middle school, option 1, option 2, option 3 for the elementaries and central office. And then down here, this is kind of grouping them together for total for all buildings, so for the whole district. So you've got option 1, option 2, option 3. Option 3 is a big number related to that because you would want to quickly do those additions at Brookville Elementary to be able to facilitate consolidation of the other elementaries. But once you get to the total amount, they're all rather comparable.
Somebody breaks the silence here. It's killing me.
It's a lot to take in.
And I've seen it 3 times and I still have
Yeah.
to. So we're gonna do an option 4 and then we need to add that wastewater treatment plant.
I think there's
in
two
there
more
as well.
scores that we're missing from one electrical group. So
Okay.
we'll make sure we clean up all of the mechanical items that we're missing. We'll develop an option 4, and then if there are other sort of errors that you're seeing in there, things that are going on. This is still in draft mode, so we can change those in the next couple weeks before we publish it and we take the word draft off of it and it's official.
No, thank you very much. You gave us a lot of information.
Any questions?
Thank you for engaging us. We do perform these studies for a minor fee, because we do hope that if you guys do proceed, and even if it's just some of the fix-up and repairs or whatever, we'd certainly like you to consider hiring us to help with that design work. And, we appreciate the working relationship that we've had so far. And we certainly look for long-term relationships with school clients. And so in the future, if there's anything related to your facilities that we can help you with, we certainly hope that you reach out and give us the opportunity. So thank you very much, and we'll get that option for and kind of get back to you.
Are you guys just swamped with what's going on in Indiana and?
We are blessed to be very busy.
Swamp, blessed,
You
same
know,
word.
Everybody's, like I said, every school district's different. We do a lot of work around here. You might know we're working at Sunman Dearborn right now, which we're implementing about $50 million in addition and renovations. We're working at South Dearborn schools right now, and they're looking at doing about $18 million. I think they're trying to keep up with Sunman Dearborn so they don't lose all their kids. We're at Lawrenceburg schools doing a renovation of their, high school that was built 100 years ago.
Well, then you would know my question then. I was going to say, I think Sunman Dearborn, it went into the pre-K 3 and then they went to the middle or the
They
4 or
they're-
5
they're
or,
still going to operate 3 elementary schools.
but they have them according to,
They didn't change.
Not that,
they didn't
not that
totally
I'm aware of.
okay, what's the new building out there on 1? What's housed in there? No, it's on 1. It's a little bit out of,
Just
Not
past
sure.
East
Where's
Central.
on Sunman Elementary?
yeah, it's on the
Yeah,
left
we do.
as you go past the high school entrance.
They don't have a new building, do they?
That's the elementary school. Elementary and.
Yeah, I was thinking that they had put maybe 4, 5, maybe 5, 6, 7, or maybe 4, 5, 6. I don't know. I was thinking
Yeah,
that
they're
they,
still operating 3 elementaries, middle school and high school right now. They just had a big debt cliff that
Yeah.
we were able to fill in without raising taxes and do a lot of work.
Yeah, our problem is the size of the county with the location and transportation to students to locations make it very difficult.
And I get that. We work with Brown County schools, and they're a similar county-wide school. They have closed over the years 2 of their elementaries and brought more kids into Nashville. They're still operating one, Sprunica, that's on liquid petroleum, and they're losing kids next door to them, Hensley Jackson. They're a county-wide school and transportation issues, and I think they're struggling and they're losing enrollment, losing kids to the neighboring schools.
Yeah, well, in fairness, the size of your county directly is proportionate to the number of students that may go to a neighboring school because of the travel.
Right, yeah,
It makes it very difficult to operate. In the past, when you lived in a school district, you could count on that. Now, it's kind of hit and miss, and it's really cost schools like ours.
Yeah, we need a Amazon place in Franklin County.
Might just be a matter of time.
Then you have to make sure they don't tiff them as your next.
Right,
So
right.
That and exempt them from paying taxes for 10 years.
Yeah, so you do face those too. It's tough. It's very tough. So we understand.
And
Well,
they're using
thank
up all
you
the
for coming
students.
down, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just reach back out to me when you want
Okay.
to come back on site.
No,
Be a fun
no, the
activity.
Career Center kids have to be
Just the
students
just
too.
the hardware.
I get the building trades kids.
Well, just the hardware.
Rick,
Just
you and I
just
can
the
do it.
doorknob
I've done it a
itself.
million times over.
Not even the labor to put them in.
The doorknobs are like $180.
Okay, that was a lot of information.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go on to the board policy revisions.
Done.
Closure one, discussion and board action.
The only, we're gonna review as many as as you'd like tonight, but three that I'd like to revisit, was from the last week. And the first one was emergency. So all three of these, you wanted me to add something for special meetings, the parliamentary authority, and the emergency meetings. I consulted with our representative, Jim. In all three of those, this are based on Indiana code. So if you're going and you're adding these, he said you could do that. He said, but you're changing what Indiana code is, and if there was ever an opportunity or something that would challenge us in a particular aspect on these particular policies, we probably would not win that because we went against Indiana code. So the first one was the special meetings may be called by the president or the superintendent. It's very clear in the Indiana code that that is the wording. There was a request that we add or upon request of two board members. The other one was the Robert's Rule of Order, adding a sentence, errors and admissions made in good faith will not be grounds to overturn a decision. And then on the third one, the emergency meetings, we were talking about the monetary loss, adding that, but you know, when you read that, it talks about the health, safety, and welfare. I think if we were challenged and we said the reason why we were having a board emergency meeting, I think that would fall under welfare. So my suggestion is we don't go and add those changes, but those are the three I'd at least like to approve tonight, so we can move on in our next stack. So thoughts, questions, discussions?
But I recommend not going against the state law.
Is that a motion?
No.
I
I'm just
agree.
saying I
I
recommend
agree.
not going against state law, just in case if there's a lawsuit about anything. Does anybody else have any input?
I agree.
Grant, how about you? You have any input on that one?
I would be shocked if the state law says Robert's Rules of Order, but maybe it's in there.
And I would be shocked that if two board members requested a special board meeting, that would produce a lawsuit, wouldn't you? I mean, what would be the grounds or basis of that? Is that it didn't allow it in state law, but we are the legal entity for the school corporation according to Indiana code. So if we add it on, it just becomes additional too, right?
Correct.
So I don't see the harm of adding that one in. The other ones I have no problem with.
Is there a motion?
Motion for what?
Well, I guess we need to have a little bit of discussion. Who feels that two members should not be allowed to call a special board meeting? Does anyone feel like two members should call a board meeting then?
But if two members get together and would come to the president about that you think a board meeting should be.
Well, but if you're the president, you feel adamantly against it, you may not. Because that would be the power of the president alone.
Yeah.
It's kind of a check and balance, in my opinion.
I see your point.
So you want to go against Indiana code?
I'm not going against Indiana code. How am I going against code?
You're just
I'm
adding that. No.
I feel like that's
You're
very
asking.
defensive. I'm asking a question.
No, that's what I mean, is how am I going against the code, though?
Then I must have misunderstood
Indiana-
Tammy. I thought she said Indiana code said that the
Specifically-
president or the
Or
superintendent can call a meeting.
It says that, but it also gives us the authority to give regulations to our school corporation. And so if we decide to add to it,
Take
if
away
we
from
were to take one away, we would be going against Indiana code.
But I
But-
think the wording, Francis, I think we gotta stay with the wording in the
Well,
code.
I'm just saying I'm
I
not for it,
understand,
but.
I'm just
I mean,
saying what I'm,
Don't kick me again, okay?
How likely are we to have a problem with this, with adding?
We haven't had a problem with that. I'm typically, probably more so, calling a special board meeting than the board president. I can't remember, maybe, since you've taken office, maybe the one on solar.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's me. So, and if someone wants a meeting, they're probably reaching out to me.
And I agree with that. But just in the case that there were, like I said, it's just a check and balance in my book. That's the way I look at it. But
well, you remember what we got in trouble on the COVID thing, you know?
well, I'm confused. We were disobeying Indiana code there. That's a point there.
So worst case scenario is that we would have to wait until a regular school board meeting to bring up whatever concern or issue.
Correct. As an agenda item.
Right. So it doesn't preclude us from being able to discuss whatever we want. We just can't necessarily
Yeah.
call a meeting within the 3-week time frame from the last meeting.
The only reason I say that is because if, for example, a teacher were to have an affair with somebody and you found out about it, it's not something you want to have an open meeting, but if you have to, they're
Well,
trying to.
that's something that you would come to the superintendent about.
I would sure hope the superintendent would call
Okay.
a meeting about
Well,
something like
you
that.
can put your motion forward.
So special meetings, let's do that one.
I'll make a motion to accept.
As is.
As is IC code.
Yes.
Need a second?
Second.
Beth? All in favor by raising your hand?
Opposed.
One opposed, Francis? Okay. Moving on to the next one.
Second one is the parliamentary authority.
Sorry. I can't get them all off.
As is, or adding the statement that Grant had talked about at the last meeting, errors in admissions made in good faith will not be grounds to overturn a decision.
How do you feel about that, Grant?
I'm not gonna get in a fight over it.
Okay. Motion to exclude.
Need a second? Sharon, second. All in favor, raise your hand.
Abstain.
One is abstain.
You realize under Robert's rules, abstentions count as a vote with for the majority.
So we had a 6-0
Yep.
and
One
Grant abstained. Okay. And the last one is the emergency meeting. Leave it as is, or add in monetary loss, imminent. I think the word was used last week.
I move we leave as is, unless there's discussion.
Need a second? Or need discussion? Need a second? Katie? All in favor, raise your hand. 7-0.
Wow, we found it.
Yay!
I knew we could do it.
So how many of these do we have in us? 5? Want to do 5?
Yeah.
Oh, Sharon says do them all. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a first read. We're not voting tonight. We would vote at the next meeting. So if there's something you want change, I can make notes and confer with Jim if it's something that needs to be discussed with the attorneys.
Call a special board meeting to, just kidding.
Yeah. So, meeting of the board defined. So that obviously there are times when you are going to gather as a board. That is not considered a board meeting. It'd be a social gathering, any kind of traveling to and from. If you're going to be going to a meeting, orientation. If I would bring 4 people in for orientation, or they're taking the oath of office, etc. So that's all this policy is saying. There are some exceptions to the majority of the board members for purpose of taking official action. It's pretty straightforward. The next one, this one is what Grant and I discussed. So now that the governor's executive order has expired, for this particular instance, COVID, we need to have a policy for electronic means to have a meeting for one of our board members. At least 50% have to be physically present. Option 1, I chose option 1, meaning 3 board members at one time. Could be on electronic means of communication, and you couldn't participate in any more than 3 a year. And they could not be more than 2 consecutive, unless A, B, C, or D, military, you're ill, you've had a death in the family, or there's an emergency. On page 2.
And that allows them to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The one caveat to that, and that is hence why we have the camera, it does say if you are participating by electronic means, any final action must be seen and heard by the community. So what that means is if you're home doing this meeting, you have to have that camera on. You can no longer just do the voice. We have to be able to see you, and that camera has to be on that screen so the community, when they're streaming that on their YouTube.
Will that camera be our phone, or a smartphone?
Yeah, you should be able to, yeah.
How does that camera see us and the screen?
It saw Tara tonight, the presentation.
Someone's going to be behind it, moving it back and forth when
Yeah,
we vote?
we're going to have to.
You have to have someone in the camera?
The community has to see the person that's not physically present.
Okay.
So they don't necessarily need to see you, but yes, we can stream that.
Got
And I
it.
think we'll get better with the placement of camera as far as we're experimenting, and Toby is as well. So,
Okay.
It's just a matter of time until we have a director
and
saying camera
that
two.
last piece on there, you cannot participate. You could. You're only going to be a listener on those final actions, such as adopting a budget, riffing, referendum, etc. Anytime where that's on the agenda, you have to be in person, physically present to vote on those. So just keep that in mind.
Does that mean that if you are on, you cannot join in on the discussion?
Correct. You could be a listener.
Strictly a listener, no
Correct.
discussion. Okay.
Yes. And they did add that a technological failure doesn't prevent the meeting from going on. What it's going to happen is if that's why I said no more than 3, because if that does happen, we still have 4 here physically present that could vote. You just never know what's going to happen with the technology, and I don't want to put us in a position where we're together and we can't move forward with the meeting. So, hence that. So, any questions on that? Grant, does that kind of fall in line with what you're doing?
Yeah, the only thing is, do we talk about any kind of a roll call vote, or? how do
Yeah,
we
it does.
Everybody knows who actually
It does. If anybody is not physically present, we have to do a roll call. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I do the county policy. That was my main
Yes.
concern, is making sure people all knew who was there.
Correct.
And then the other question I have is, in the event that, let's say, weather conditions prohibit, let's say 4 people from coming here for a meeting,
We wouldn't have.
we just wouldn't have a meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a time limit on that? Like, do we have to know how much time do we have to cancel a meeting?
Well, if it's weather related, I would say that would be an emergency involving maybe a threat to the safety of our board members.
Okay.
Especially if we're on a travel advisory or something. So the meetings during a declared disaster, which we've been in for almost the last 2 years, you're not, you have a little more freedom, I guess. That means all board members. So we did that at the beginning of this pandemic, pretty much. The first 4 or 5 months, we were having meetings and no one was here except maybe superintendent and the board president. Everybody else was at home, and that would be allowed under a governor's executive order. That's the main difference between that and then what we would adopt beyond that. So keep that in mind. Obviously, the roll call is part of that. We have to have a quorum participating. So last week we streamed it on Facebook Live. I think tonight he's experimenting with YouTube, and I think that's the way we'll go. But I haven't talked to him yet. So, moving on, the president of the board shall preside at the meetings. And perform other duties as assigned by me. It's pretty straightforward.
For the signing of things, does it allow if the president's unavailable for the vice president to sign? Is that
Where's that one? Which number? B, A, B, C?
no, I'm asking if that's something.
Being the vice president.
Yeah.
None of
I
that, but you
believe
can get electronic signatures now, so.
I believe that for the first batch we approved
Okay.
was the vice president would serve in lieu of if the president was absent.
Okay.
So, yes. Notice of board meetings. We need to add, which we don't have on our agendas. It's about the 4th sentence down. It starts, the board meeting site is fully accessible to all persons. We need to add that to our agendas, which we do not have. And that we are giving proper notice, which we do. We follow that to a T. But I know we don't have that sentence, so I need to add that. Notice of regular board meetings, 48 hours in advance, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays, which we do now. And they have to have the date, time, and place, which were voted on at the annual meeting. So we've done that, but that's what's in this policy. 48 hours, special board meetings. So that second sentence, I circled it and highlighted in case we change the other, but we'll have a special board meeting when called by the president or the superintendent, so that will stay. We can take board action at a special board meeting, but it goes from 48 to 72 hours. And the last one is the emergency. I believe anybody can.
have the answer.
What's that?
It doesn't say in that section on the notice, I don't know who.
Yeah, I don't know because it doesn't really say. I would assume it would either be the president or the superintendent. Most likely the superintendent.
I will find out which policy that is addressed in and let you know, since we're not approving anything tonight. So that notice on the others, obviously the media gets those notices, and they would get the same amount of notice that you would on an emergency board meeting. Typically, an emergency board meeting could be the day of or at least 24 hours. That we need to have that. But I will find out that. So this is talking about the notice requirements by other statutes, such as what we did tonight with the superintendent, the public hearing. So that was published in the newspaper at a minimum of a 10-day notice. So there are certain things when you're doing bonds and things that we went through the last couple of years, there are changes in when and how long those things have to be publicized. Series of meetings. Members of the board may not participate if the series consists of at least 2 gatherings and the series meets all the following criteria.
I hate this rule, but it's state law.
So sum it up
Well-
for us, Grant.
Basically, you can't daisy chain together a bunch of meetings and you effectively got a quorum.
Gotcha.
So if you meet this group and this group and this group, but I think there's literally no way to do it. Don't quote me on this as legal advice. If it's only 2s,
2s.
the meeting, there has to be at least 1 3 in the chain.
So if Sharon and Beth and I got together, and then Beth and Rick and I got together,
I think the second one may only have to be 2, or like a series of 2.
but it would be have 2 inclusive of the first 3. In other words, it'd have to be either Beth and I, Sharon and I, or Sharon and Beth.
No, I think
That's
there's,
an overlap, because that's where the serial comes from.
Yeah.
Because then you can tell the other person.
I don't think we're gonna have any problem with that.
so in your
Just don't
scenario,
get
if it
you
was
with a bunch of meetings in a row.
me, you, and Beth, then one of us then go meet with Rick, any one of us.
Well, I don't like you two that much, so we're okay.
I don't know.
Saying.
The next one, the agenda. Obviously, you in your board packet, which is in your Google Drive, you do get notice of when those meetings are occurring and what's going to be the agenda, what it looks like. About 3 sentences down, it says this meeting is a meeting of the school board in public for the purposes of. That should be on our agenda as well, so I will be adding that once it's approved.
That's only on your Google Drive if your password is up to
Yes.
date.
And it does specifically say it is a business meeting, is not to be considered a public community meeting, but there will be time for public participation as indicated by agenda item number, which we do have that always. Participation from the public and then participation from employees. So we have that in there. I would just need to add that agenda letter or item number.
For the adding items to the agenda upon concurrence of the board president, does it have to have concurrence of the board president? I guess I'm kind of circling back to one of the questions that Francis had of, what if I want to call a special morning meeting?
Which one was that?
The X.
Under the agenda.
We can't call a board meeting on our own, but if we want to add something to the agenda now, we're kind of back into that loop of saying, well, now you still have to have the president to agree with it. Are we allowed to take out?
You don't have to agree with it. If you want to add something to the agenda,
Right now, it says you do.
he has to agree.
That's what the X
That's
says.
what that
What
X
was
says.
this?
That's what I'm saying. Can we take that last part of that sentence of the concurrence of
Because
the
we
board?
do that now in our agendas.
At
The
the
very
end,
end, we
yes.
say
Right.
future agenda items.
Yes.
So can we just take that off of there, and that way if we have an issue or something that we want brought up, and the president happens to be against it, we can
Right.
still get it on the agenda
Right.
to
That's
discuss.
the way it's on now.
Right,
You could just go to the superintendent, couldn't you?
right, but
Well,
that,
but
that's why I want it changed in the
this-
policy to say that, because right now
Strike
it's not
that.
what it
I want to
says,
strike that out of there.
You just want a period after the
Yeah.
agenda.
if that's possible.
Check.
Where is it? I can't see it.
We do post our meetings at the entrance. Consent agendas. So we do not have a consent agenda item on our current agendas. I know that some of you have talked about the personnel side of things. It does get a little bit cumbersome, and it does seem to be drawn out at times. So if we have consent agenda item on our current agenda, we could include minutes of the prior meeting, bills for payment, hiring of personnel, any resignations or leaves, or any kind of resolutions. I can't think of one now, but
Bank signatures or.
so we can include all those, none of those, a few of those. But right now, we don't have a consent agenda item.
We use that at the library, and it's, sometimes we will have one topic come up where we have to discuss.
Mhm.
But if there's nothing to discuss in that list, then you can approve that, and it doesn't need to be.
Right. There, that's,
And I think it works
that
really
last
well.
paragraph,
Yeah.
any board member may request an item to be removed from the
Right.
consent resolution. So right now, the minutes are a separate vote. Our entire bills for payment, and the hiring and the resignations and the leaves, which we don't bring leaves anyway. Maternity leaves we used to, but we don't now. Any hiring or resignations, retirements, that would all be in one vote.
Can we do
Unless you
extracurricular
wanna-
activities as well? I
Yeah,
don't
it
know
would
if
be
that-
hiring a
I don't
personnel.
know.
I would think it would
Does
fall
that
in there.
fall under there?
Mhm.
Okay. Because that one gets pretty big too.
So that would be, we wouldn't read all that stuff. It would say consent agenda items.
I hope it doesn't
We'd
say
need
that.
a first and second, and we vote. So that's a lot of it. It's a lot of information we're not talking about unless you call me ahead of time and I pull that out as a separate item. But we're not approving it tonight, so think about it.
So we would go through those, it's just that we wouldn't stop and take a vote.
We would not go through them. No,
We just
No.
call for a vote on the consent.
consent item.
Whatever's listed under that.
It actually probably first you would ask if anybody wants to pull anything out,
Okay.
and then you would vote on everything else. And then deal with whatever they want pulled out.
So, moving on, voting. A member participating electronically shall be considered present for establishing a quorum, but may only participate, a lot of this you hear over and over again, only if the member can be seen and heard. Then we will have to do a roll call. Executive session, that lists what we can and can't do. And typically when I post an executive session agenda, I will list the items that we're going to discuss. It may be B or I. I get a little more detailed probably than what's in here. And what I don't do, that last sentence on that page, I need to add that to the minutes, which I don't. So that would be an addition. adjournment. A meeting may not be recessed or adjourned for the purpose of conducting an executive session. So anytime during a special board meeting or a regular board meeting, we can't adjourn to go in executive session and come back because we haven't given proper notice. So
Unless, now, can we give notice that we're gonna do that? 24 hours or 72 hours ahead?
we have done executive sessions after a board meeting, but it's been publicized, but never in the middle of a meeting.
You have to publicize why you're having the executive session.
Yes, and typically it could be discussing individual teacher performance or administrative performance. We've done that before, yes. Before, then we have a meeting, and then we're finished.
Right.
Yes, knowing that it was going to take a long time. Use of mail by board email. Obviously, it can't be used for campaigning purposes. This one I found interesting. I don't know. It's about about 4 paragraphs down. If a board member sends an email message to a school employee, the superintendent shall be sent a copy of the message at the time the original message is sent. I want clarification. Is that in Indiana code, or is that, there's no X by it, so we weren't able to choose that, but
Now that's if we
I don't know if
use
that's happening now.
the school email.
School,
if we use
correct.
our personal email,
Correct.
I would say that's probably in Indiana code. And that's not in now, so we'd have to add that.
Correct. That is not in anywhere of our policies. And I don't believe we have that next paragraph where it talks about that email message at the end. It talks about the Access to Public Records Act. We would have to add that as like a signature line on an email that I don't believe is there now. So that would be an addition that we don't have in policy that we're.
Tammy, what are you,
It's about the second paragraph from the bottom. Email message to and from. Oh. Oh. Oh.
I don't have it.
160. Is everybody seeing what I'm seeing?
yeah, I did.
Until we put that on by default.
Yes. Yes. Any questions on that? 168.1.
Email for you to read.
Open meetings. The board shall designate a person to keep minutes. I guess I need to be designated that person. They're approved, endorsed by the secretary, and I do my best to make sure that I'm recording who's voting for what, who makes the motion, and they should be available for public inspection no later than 5 days after the meeting in which they are approved, which we get them online.
How long do they remain online?
They're archived back for years, many, many years. And then we have physical copies of all of that in the safe. And we also have them scanned into the cloud as well. So if we had a catastrophic event, we could always get them. Executive session has to give the date, time, and place, and what members were either present or absent, which we do. And then in the minutes, maybe this is what I was talking about, that sentence, the board shall certify in the minutes that it discussed no subject matter in the executive session other than what's on the public notice. That's what I don't have in our minutes that I'm going to have to add if this policy is approved. There's the vice president preside at meetings when the president is not able to attend and perform other duties appropriate to the office. And then in case of a vacancy in the office of president, the vice president succeeds for the term. Secretary, record and sign the minutes orders, resolutions, etc. Preside when the president and vice president can't. And if the vice president vacates, they now become the vice president and perform other duties required by law. Treasurer, which we appoint at our annual meeting in January. We obviously appoint our business manager. They are the custodian of all the funds. They receipt all the funds and deposit according to law. Period. We did not add any other options. Legal counsel, we do appoint. So they do serve as legal counsel for the board and the superintendent, and then others designated, such as any kind of policy that we may put in the handbook. I would designate or the building principal to confer with Amber on that. We do reports. We do the financial report and the annual report. That is required by law. Our business manager would submit that. Memberships, state board, state school boards association. We are members. It says may maintain, so if we choose not to do it one year, we don't have to. But I would never suggest we're not, because we get a lot of information.
Are we members of the national?
We are not, no.
That's why we don't get to go to California.
Used to.
I know.
Used to back in the day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help any? I don't know if it would.
For national issues, and not only that, but you learn how different schools are doing different things in different areas.
I never knew
And
how
it
much
works on your
is.
Suntan, you get to visit a zoo.
I'll find out what the cost is.
Well, if you
And the last one, I think it's more of a repeat, but it's talking about conferences, conventions, and workshops, and your travel expenses. And it's encouraged to attend workshops, which I emailed you about the district meeting. So check your email and respond to me whether you're wanting to go or not.
You going?
When is it? May what?
6th.
6.
May 6th. So those were pretty easy, I think. I got
In my
a few-
board packet, it had the addressing the board attached to the end of this. Are we not going to do that tonight?
May 6th is on
Friday.
It's in there.
That's okay.
Oh, it is? I didn't. So public comments.
I say we table that.
So I don't know that our current policy needs to change based on what was approved, because it says public comment is allowed and anybody that signs up has a right to speak. And that's what we're doing right now. The only thing that we could do is,
The number of slots on a piece of paper.
yes.
If we're going to enforce the 3-minute speech, then it's fine. But if you're going to alleviate and allow more, then you need to have less signatures.
Well, I want to get clarification, and maybe this isn't important, but it said anybody could sign up. We have talked about they either need to be living in this community and or
Paying taxes in this community.
having a student that goes to our school system.
Yeah.
And that's the one. That's not the way it's worded. So I want to get clarification on that.
And I think that's fair.
So if the way it's written, it's anybody that signs up can speak. But if we could limit who can speak, I think we need to discuss it and consider it. Because
I don't
that-
think we should have anybody that wants to come and speak, because you get outside influences that have no interest in Franklin County School Corporation
No
coming
skin in
in.
the game.
Right, coming in and putting their information in, where if you have kids that go to school, or you have interest, financial interest in paying taxes and stuff like that, you should be able to, but not just anybody.
Well, how far do we go down the chain? I mean, like we've had a grandpa come in and then we've had
He's got,
parents.
probably
he's
lives in the
got,
community,
he's
though.
got interest, if that's relation, yeah.
And is he living in the county?
Well, he-
What do you
he
want, a
could-
$50
No,
per
he,
No.
listen,
speaker
he's
fee
still,
here?
he's still could have a child in this school system but not live in the
Yeah.
county.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He would have interest.
We have that. This would just eliminate somebody that lived in Indianapolis coming down here.
As the
Stirring
political
up
group will say.
the emotions that don't
stirring
need
the
to be
pot.
stirred up.
Or, yeah.
Stirring the pot. We
So-
don't need that.
So,
Crossing state
but the way
line.
it's written, that does not say that, but
Crossing state line.
I've got several meetings coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks that will talk about exactly what board policy was approved in, or the Senate bills and the House bills, and what they exactly mean. So I will get clarification on that. But I think as our board policy is now, we are fine, unless we wanted to change that.
Can you see if we have to allow them to speak in the order that they sign up? Or if we are allowed to move them around? I don't
I
know if
believe
there's
you're
anything.
allowed to move them around.
Yeah, I
Well,
haven't
that's why
seen,
I'm
yeah.
asking, because if we have the ability to move them around, I would recommend we do that and put like topics together. But I don't know if there's anything saying if I came first and signed up first, I should get to speak first.
Well, and that's also
So
the role of your
that's what I would
president,
like
is
for-
to prevent repetitive comments.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but, that's a repetitive comment, we're gonna strike that.
Yes, I will find out once I get some clarification.
Thanks.
Now, under the board policy revision, we have down there discussion and board action.
We,
Uh,
the 3 that we presented
that was the
first,
ones,
those are
okay,
the ones,
okay.
yes. These are just for discussion.
Okay.
We already did the 3 that I wanted approved.
Does anybody have any else to bring up? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
When's the next meeting?
The
Next week?
14th, regular board meeting,
Oh. Gee,
7:50.
I think I'll be washing my hair that night. I don't know.